This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com or, of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by director and post specialist Jamie Hitchings, whose work recently includes the feature documentary Catching Air about air guitar competitions and their competitors. Welcome to the show, Jamie.
Thank you, Gordon.
I guess, how did you discover this community and how did this documentary evolve from that?
Well, for a long time, I've worked nonprofit, and I worked nonprofit for the United Nations, and I was doing a lot of kind of heavy work for the United Nations, very important work, but very just taxing work. And I wanted to do something to where I could bring some joy to people, and I wasn't sure what that was going to be, and I was kind of rolling around different ideas. And then one day I was in my car and I heard my co-producer Eric Moline on NPR talking about air guitar, and I had never heard about this before. And so what happened is my next door neighbor at the time actually knew Eric Moline, and I was able to contact him. And Eric, as soon as I met with my co-producer Eric, he was immediately like into the idea of doing this documentary. So that's how it came about.
I grew up in a household in the projects in East Harlem. There's a program at WNET, the public television station, to get more people of color behind the camera, in the editing room, doing sound, writing scripts. When they put me in a dark room and they showed me how to use the splicer and the rewinds, I felt this big sigh of relief, this sense of, wow, I found my space. The editing part of filmmaking is the real nuts and bolts, what makes films come to life. You can ask Spielberg, you can ask Tarantino, you can ask Spike. When you sit here, this is where the proof is in the pudding. I'm Sam Pollard, and this is my class on documentary editing.
Oh, interesting. Now, because you were doing stuff with the UN, were you aware when you first started talking, or on the interview that you heard, did they discuss the piece level of air guitar? Because that was something I'd never heard of.
So yes, and that's something that I was really, really drawn to, because when I heard Eric speak, he didn't give me, or it was an interview on the radio. Wasn't a lot of information, but when I met with him, that was one of the things that really grabbed my attention, was the idea that if everybody put down their guns and picked up an air guitar, there'd be no war. And that became kind of a very important part of the documentary.
So when you were first starting to approach this, how did you figure out, how you were going to, like, the sort of, I guess, the style, because there's some playfulness in this with like sound effects and what have you throughout?
So there was a documentary before this one, many years before this one, and it was about air guitar, called Air Guitar Nation. And that one was it was great. I from an editorial standpoint, it had nice pacing, and it was fun, but it kind of was tongue in cheek a little bit. And I knew that I wanted my doc to really take these people seriously, but I also wanted it to be playful, because air guitar in itself is very, very playful. And I have a really corny sense of humor anyway, so there's parts of me that are definitely in that, and it got laughs when we did the screening. So I'm pretty happy with it.
So what were some of the myths that you wanted to dispel about this community?
I think that from the outside, just like any other kind of niche hobby or niche competition, it looks bizarre. It looks like they're not holding anything. They're pretending to play an instrument. So one of the biggest myths is that people with no talent do this? Well, most of the people involved in the community, not all of them, but most of the people involved in the community do have some type of musical background or some types of theater background or dance background. So they have this, you know, innate ability to perform. So, and the other thing is that it takes a long time to be a successful air guitar competitor. It takes a long time. You have to pick out your song, you have to do your routine. It's a lot. It's a performance. So I wanted to kind of dispel the myth that, you know, this is just for no talent, kind of strange people. Then the other myth I wanted to dispel is that it's a competition, but it's a community. Like they all support each other. Yeah, you're going to be a little hurt if you don't get the place you wanted to get, but you're going to be really, really happy for the person that did.
So you mentioned the first doc. So when you were starting this project, how did you decide to approach it to make sure that you differentiated yourself from that doc and sort of were a standout from it?
I didn't watch the doc for a while. I didn't want to be influenced by it. I wanted to kind of start to develop my own ideas. So what we did is we did a round of interviews, and I started collecting. There's footage from all over the world in this. There's footage from Finland and from across Europe, Belgium, the United States, all across the United States, because there's air guitar competitions all across the United States. So I probably had, at the time I watched it, I probably had about a terabyte's worth of footage that I at least put my eyes on. I'd already seen, at least, you know, in fast forward. So I knew what I had, and I had some interviews. So at that point, I was kind of developing my own ideas. And then that's when I decided to watch the other documentary.
Interesting. So when you were making this film, you shot around the world. Like, how did you tackle that?
Well, we shot all the interviews in the United States.
Okay.
And this is an independent film. We didn't have the money to go.
So that was my question, is like, how did you produce this?
So we had a camera person that was in Europe, and then we were able to generously get footage from air guitar world champions. And then we were also able to get footage from US air guitar and world air guitar. So they were happy to, you know, provide footage. And that was fantastic. And then a lot of people from the community provided footage as well. And my co-producer, Eric, was in some bands. So he had footage from his bands and, you know, and that type of stuff. So it was a lot of, I don't want to say found footage, but it was a lot of donated footage, which made post a little hairy sometimes.
Well, and you mentioned in post, you had a terabyte about that. So when you're tackling a documentary, how do you like to start weeding through that footage? Like, I've talked to some editors and they're like, I just start putting everything on the timeline and chopping it down. Others are like, I go through everything and pick a scene and start working on that. How did you do it?
So because I was the producer and the editor, and I had an assistant as well, but because I was a producer and the editor, or director and editor, pardon me, I misspoke. I was kind of overwhelmed at first. I didn't really know what to do. So what we ended up doing is we ended up kind of looking at a 3-act structure. And then I was like, well, we've started on our interviews. So I think the best thing to do is to go over the transcriptions and then pull selects. So I think I had, probably 2 hours worth of selects from interviews. That was the first round of interviews. Then we did another round of interviews. So I had a lot of narration, or a lot of interview footage to kind of guide my way. Then from there, I kind of just placed it into kind of where I wanted it in my acts. And it was very, very rough because we did do more interviews. Then I kind of I kept calling it a spine. I had a spine. I didn't have any muscle or any tissue or anything else, but I had a spine to kind of work with from there. I think all total, I had about over 2 terabytes of footage for this.
Wow.
So it was a monster,
Yeah.
really.
Wow. And now, what would you say was one of the tougher things to capture, or the toughest things you didn't realize was going to happen while you were making this doc?
Music rights.
Interesting.
They are arduous, to put it very, very kindly. So in air guitar, the air guitarist will pick a song. So you could get a song from Metallica or Iron Maiden or AC/DC or any of these large bands, and there's no money to license those songs. So we had to be really, really clever, and we looked at licensing some songs, and it was more than was going to be the whole entire budget for the doc, for
Yeah.
labor and everything else. So we had to be really, really conscientious about that. So as I was editing it, I needed to have the interviews really push the performances, because I wasn't going to have the money to get the songs. And then we had a sound designer. We did pay for a sound designer that did a great job kind of filling in the blanks. And I was also able to use some of Eric Moline's his band's songs as well.
Interesting. Now you talked about having 2 terabytes. So what ended up on the cutting room floor that you wanted to put in, but you just couldn't based on length or story?
So much. I mean, this is the tale of every doc. We overshot. We had too much footage, to get there. And the thing about air guitar is that there's a competition every year. So I could have just kept shooting and shooting and shooting. There was more storylines. There was definitely more personalities to discover and talk about. But I knew that when I was going into this, I wanted to, Eric was going to be our anchor, the character, not the person, the subject. Eric was going to be our anchor, but I knew I wanted female stories as well. So that's why I focused on a couple female stories. But there was a lot more content, and this could be a series. I don't know if anybody would watch it, but it could definitely be a series of just, who are we showcasing in this episode? What's their backstory and everything else? Because I think that's really interesting. Like, what brought these people to this place? What brought these people to this community? Who are they outside of their persona in air guitar?
Well, and that brings, like you mentioned, women. One of my favorite is Mom Jean's Jeannie. So how did you discover her?
Eric Moline gave me access. So he gave me access to everybody in air guitar. He introduced me to a lot of people. And I actually met her husband, who's Van Damage, Luke in the movie, or Van Damage in the movie. I actually met her husband and interviewed him. And then through him, I got to know her. And I just loved her character. I loved her that she tried out different things, that she had this creative side, but she also had a very kind of practical side, and her day-to-day and everything else. And I was latched on, and I love the character of Mom Jeans. I think that, anybody with the kids or anybody that has a mom can actually relate to Mom Jeans.
Well, and the fact that she got actual mom jeans for the performance was a bonus.
Fantastic, right? And she does like little embroidery on her shirts and stuff. Yeah, that's vintage. That's like vintage.
Yeah. Well, so like, because you talk about like her day-to-day life is a bit more normal. Did you guys have footage of them at work and outside of the air guitar world, or?
We did for Eric and Andrew Finn, Flying Finn. And Mom Jeans is an actual mom. She has children, and I didn't really want to kind of expose her to that. And she was a manager at a store, and that was not necessarily something we wanted to try to get clearance for. But that would have been interesting to get footage of her and her kind of day to day. And we did have some footage of her son in the interviews, but I decided to kind of leave him out of it too, because he's very, very young.
How did they feel about it as young kids, if you're okay answering that?
He loved it. Well, it was funny. This obviously didn't make it into the film, but we were interviewing Mom Jean's Jeannie in Austin. And then his little head pops in and he's just kind of right here. And then he's like sitting there and he's, he's kind of a little bit distracting. But then I forget what he had to say, but he had a couple like, cute little innocent things to say as well.
Do you have a favorite performance from the?
I have a few favorite performances. One of them actually didn't even get into the doc. The character Peter Stiff Dickens, he does kind of a more creative approach to air guitar, and he did this kind of skit piece where he's a retail specialist at Guitar Center, and he's just kind of like playing riffs and things, and he had like the red shirt on and it looked like he had a Guitar Center badge on. And I didn't get that. Unfortunately, I didn't get that in there. And I probably could have put it in there in the B-roll someplace, but there was one point where Peter had a larger point or part in the doc. I kind of pulled it back a little bit, not for any reason, but I kind of wanted to showcase more women. So that didn't make it in there, but I love that performance. My co-producer Eric Moline, his 2013 winning performance is fantastic. Mom Jeans, although you didn't know the song, Mom Jeans, when she spits out that's Enter Sandman, and that it's a fantastic piece.
That's so interesting.
So of course I can't get Enter Sandman, but it was a really amazing piece. And then Matt Burns, I mean, he's just amazing as far as his performances go. And I have a lot of favorites. I know a lot about air guitar obviously now, so I can tell you what good performances.
Well, and what's fascinating to me was how many actually play instruments. And it wasn't, and so like they could get up and shred, but they're like, you know what, I'm gonna go guitarless today. Was there did you talk to them about that? Was there a reason why they?
Eric and most of his band members have done air guitar, and it's just kind of a different, at the end of the day, these people that do this, they're all hams. They really are. They just kind of want the stage. So maybe air guitar is a little bit better because you can be up there all by yourself. And I think that ultimately it's just an outlet for creativity. You know what I mean? So it doesn't necessarily, you're not discounting not playing your instrument. You're just adding something else to your repertoire, so to say.
So are you going to follow this doc up with one on air drumming?
I mean, everybody does it. Everybody air drums. Unfortunately, there's not a international competition for air drumming.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe you can start it.
Yeah. My wife would be like, you drum too much, please stop. So yeah, I don't think she'd be a fan of that. I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
I am a lifelong Star Trek fan. It's not a guilty, anything Star Trek is really what I love. And I guess my favorite guilty pleasure from Star Trek, gosh, I don't know. It's all fantastic. I guess it would probably be the amount of times I've actually watched Star Trek: The Next Generation from the first episode to the last episode. Lots of hours of my life.
Is that your favorite one, or is there?
Yeah, that's my favorite. I think that's my favorite one. I kind of go back and forth. There's it's like your children. You don't want to pick a favorite, but yeah.
Now, what about the Tim Allen film that I always hear is like one of the perfect Star Trek?
Galaxy Quest.
Galaxy Quest. That's
fantastic. I love it. I think it's really, really fantastic. I'm waiting to introduce my children to that until they're a little bit older.
I am blown away that it wasn't a hit in the theaters, and it was afterwards that it sort of got its footing.
Well, it's the same with Star Trek. Star Trek wasn't a hit at first, and it really gained its popularity through syndication.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview today.
No problem. Thank you very much.
And that's it for our show today, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com and, of course, on Instagram at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Brickell. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs.